Welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hello, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. And in life, there are people who have these incredible stories that make you, one, so grateful for everything that you have, and two, absolutely aghast by everything that they've been through. But then they fill you also with this inspiration because they have overcome so much more than we could ever possibly know. And we have one such incredible, extraordinary person with us on the show today. I had the privilege of meeting her while working with the people from the Planted Expo. She is part of that extraordinary team, and she has an extraordinary story. And with that, here to share it with us today is Alana Moor. Alana, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. That was a really nice introduction.
I mean,
Appreciate that.
just wait until we dive into the story. People will understand, like, holy cow, this girl has overcome some challenges. Because I mean, I think that that's really even like slow playing it. I mean, when we say that you've overcome some challenges, it's like this is real life hit you in the face a whole bunch over and over and over again, and still, like the poem, you rise.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen to that.
Amen.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's the truth.
Of
Oh,
course.
we're all given what we need, right?
Absolutely. And I think the average person looking at you who's watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast, there's a link to the video down below. But Alana, I think that the average person who's looking at you would see a very successful professional woman and have absolutely no idea. They would be stunned to know that you actually spent time in prison.
Yeah, I did. Looks so deceiving.
How does that even happen for someone like you? What happened?
Yeah, good question. Great starting. So 24 years old. Let's go back. I'm a few years older than 24 now. I was living in Vancouver. I made this decision on a whim because I had always had this love for fashion. Okay. So I remember I was having a conversation with my father one day and he said, "You should go for it. You should go and you should do fashion the way that you want to do it." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to do that." I sold everything that I had. I made the decision to move to Toronto from Vancouver and go to school for fashion. And I loved it. I had an amazing time. It was a 2.5 year program. I worked my butt off and graduated with honors. And when I was finished, the one thing that I knew was that I wanted to be a famous fashion designer. Now, don't look at me and think that I was this like super driven, disciplined female. I was a girl that was going to college, that was living the college lifestyle, working in a nightclub, working in a bar to make ends meet, partying, living it up, and was very enticed by that world. Right. And for anybody that knows Toronto, it's that type of a lifestyle, right? It's very different than Vancouver. There's celebrities and they have an NBA team here. And I was very wrapped up in that world. That's the reality of the situation. So I was hungry, but I was also had this drive and this focus to be famous that was maybe a little bit unhealthy. And so I made this decision when I finished school that in order to build myself up and to become a famous fashion designer, the thing that I needed to do was build my following. Now, this was the time when Instagram models had just sort of like hit the ground running. And, Instagram was very new at that time. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I need to build my portfolio. Cool. So I'm working in the nightclub scene at this time. I'm doing bottle service. And I keep seeing this girl who produces these huge shows, or not shows, these huge, like club nights, right? And big celebrities show up, NBA artists and The Weeknd and Drake and all these people show up to these club nights. So I'm sort of like looking at her like she has everything I want. So I remember I had wanted to sort of get myself in touch with her. We had this night one night where the manager of the nightclub had asked us all to go out for dinner for his birthday. We all went out. She was there. And I remember the guy that I was dating at the time, I said, "Listen, I'm going to go and basically cold call her and ask her if I can be her stylist." Because my idea was, okay, how do I build myself up? Let me be a stylist, build my portfolio that way. And then once I have a bit of a following, I will begin my brand that way. So I cold called her. I sat down with her that night and I said, listen, this is what I want to do. And she said yes. She was like, I know who you are. I've seen you around. I had an Instagram page at this time that was focused on fashion. She goes, let's do it. She said, but at this moment, I can't pay you. So what I can do is I can bring you to all of the events with me, introduce you as my stylist, and start to create your name and the buzz around your name that way. And then once I start to make money, because she was also kind of in the music industry at this time. And she's like, I'm getting all these grants from the government and da 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 da. Once I have money, then I can pay you. I said, done. I'm not even looking for pay right now. What I'm looking for is someone that can help me to build my portfolio and then help to push my clothing line once I drop it. Cool. So let's fast forward a year and a half. I'm working with her very closely. Her and I have become sort of like family. She spends the night at my house. I've met her family. And the way that my life was working at that time was I would work at the nightclub or I would work at my restaurant job. I would get off at 12:31, 2 in the morning. I would go down to this clothing store on Queen Street that a friend of mine owned at the time. And he let me come in and pull outfits for her. So I'd be there until 3:34 in the morning. I'd go home, I'd go to bed, I'd wake up and go back and see her.
So you're busting your hump at this point. I mean, how many hours of sleep were you averaging in a night? Because it sounds like you're working 2 full-time jobs at the time.
Yeah, I would say like maybe 3.5, 4. And it was the hustle, right? It was
Right.
what you have to do. For anybody that knows, like if there's a goal that you have in mind, you're going to do what you need to do to get there.
Sure.
So I did.
Sure.
Okay.
Quick side note before we continue. I
Yeah.
mean, how is your health? Because obviously we have a big health audience listening to the show. So, I mean, you're not getting a lot of sleep. It sounds like everything's super stressful, but you're chasing your dream, which is admirable. But how was your health at this point? Were you noticing any challenges starting to creep up?
Yeah. And if I'm honest with you, for the health audience, um, I was tired, I was run down, and I was partying. So what happens when you party? Typically you're out drinking and, your body isn't performing the way that it would be. Now, keep in mind, I'm 24 years old. Things are a lot different at 24 than they are now at 37, right?
That
So
they
your
are.
body, yeah, you can endure so much more. And the other thing is I had no other commitments. So I could sleep when I wanted to. But I will say this, it just popped into my head. I would get these like really bad sicknesses, right? So when I would get the flu, it wouldn't be just like one day I could like grind through it. It would be 3, 4 days that I was out, right? And I would push through, but my voice was raspy at that time. And it wasn't the best thing for me to do for my body. But on the other side of that, Chuck, is I was always active, right? I was always active. I was a dancer. I was a soccer player. I worked out. And that I think sort of saved me. And I always just had a very strong body. So like, it's true. I had someone say it like, you should be dead from what your body has endured, but I'm just strong anyways.
There you go. All
Yeah.
right.
You got off track. Sorry.
No, it's cool. All right. So now we've got that established. Let's go back. So you're splitting your time between working in the club, working in the restaurant, and then you go and you do the fashion hustle after that. You're not getting a lot of sleep. So that's kind of where we left off.
Yeah. So this is sort of like where it all happened for me, right? It's been a year and a half. I've been working for her. I'm getting into like incredibly just these like wild VIP parties. I'm meeting producers and artists and rappers and NBA players. And some of them are starting to know who I am and like, oh, you're her Sir Stylist. Oh, this and that. Okay, cool. And I, at that time, started to make clothing for myself. Like I was starting my clothing line. And so I was wearing it out and people were recognizing it. It felt good. So I remember I'm coming home from work one day, a year and a half after meeting her, and I get a phone call. And she's like, hey, I have this opportunity for you. I want you to come down to the office and talk to me. And I was like, okay, cool, done. So I go. And I remember I walked into her little office. She was counting money. And there was a guy sitting in the corner. And she's like, hey, this is so-and-so. Basically the personal trainer and now right-hand man to a famous artist. And I was like, oh, like interesting that you're here. So they basically sales pitched me. Okay. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a naive person. Like, I am a very independent, I am a strong willed, I have a tough character at times. So for me to get sucked into this was weird. So I remember they sales pitched me, so and so, so we have this opportunity for you. We want to first of all thank you for all the work that you've done. We want to send you on this vacation to Panama, but we also want to send you down there to do sort of like a job. And we want you to bring a bag home. Now, so and so, she started, her business. She did this for us and she made this amount of money and she was able to do it. And then this girl, she did it for us and she bought a house for herself. And so they're sort of like selling me on it that way. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And they're like, we want you to go to Panama. We want you to bring a bag back. And of course, my first thought was, is it drugs? And the first thing they said was, you don't have to worry about anything. It was like the person that I was sitting with was very powerful in their abilities to make sure that nothing happened. And your family now. It was sort of like that aha, you made it moment. And I felt like I had, and I didn't care. I knew that something was wrong. I will never sit here and say that I didn't, but I thought I was invincible because I was backed by good people, by powerful people, right? And so I said yes. It was like, do you want to go big or go home? And I was like, I want to go big. Let's do it. No problem. I'm not going to get in trouble. I'm going to go and do this thing and come back, and I'm not going to get in trouble. Done. I'm in. So I said yes. It was very much like that. It was in, out, bing, bing, bong. This is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to get prepared in the next 10 days. And it was kind of like, maybe don't share what you're doing with people. But the thing behind that was, now that you're moving into this position of starting your clothing line and, you're going to be famous, you don't need to share your life with everyone. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I don't need to share my life with everyone. It's no one's business. So I listened to them. And that's what I did. I started to lie to the people around me. The people that were closest to me were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I have an opportunity for my clothing line. And, I'm just going down to wherever I'm going. Oh, cool. Good for you. And that's how it went.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny how at a younger age, when we're so driven that we kind of blow past those red flags, the warning signs, we totally ignore, even though our spidey sense is on like DEFCON 5,
Yeah.
high alert. And I think that had you not been so driven or connected with these people, if this was just, Joe random off the street asking you to do this, you would have been like, no friggin' way, Joe. Like that,
Absolutely not.
that's just not going to happen. But we,
No.
we get this false sense of security. And maybe it's because, I don't know, part of you, maybe did you feel like if I don't do this, I'm no longer going to be in her good
Yes.
graces and I'm going to lose everything that I've been working so hard for?
100%. It was a lot of pressure, peer pressure, wanting to fit in, wanting to be somebody, wanting to be important, my own insecurities of never being good enough and finally feeling like someone was seeing me. And yeah, that fitting in. How do people get involved with gangs? That is the top 2%. That is the main reason why people get involved with gangs, is because they want to feel important. They want to feel heard. They want to feel a part of. They want to feel like they're in family. And I'm not coming here saying that I had some hard knock life. That's not the point. It was my own feelings of wanting to be this big highfalutin fashion designer, and this was my ticket to do it. And it didn't really matter what the consequences were.
So how long between when you were propositioned to do this and when you actually left for Panama?
10 days.
10 days. All right. So pretty quick turnaround. What's
Very quick.
floating through your mind over that time?
Great question. So I'm nervous. I'm nervous because even meeting, leading up to it, there were a few, like we had to go to this restaurant one night. And I say we because I wasn't the only person involved, but I will never talk about the second person that was involved. But it was, my business partner that I was going to get into fashion with. And so we had both agreed to go on this trip, right? And so we had to go to this restaurant one night, and we had to wait for them to show up, and nobody showed up. And it's like 5-6 years later, you realize that it was just people coming to scout you out, right? So I'm nervous. The guy that I'm dating at the time, bless his heart, heard about what I was doing, because I was pretty honest with him. And he was like, don't do it. Alana, please don't go. I am telling you, this is drugs. Like, I know, I am telling you, do not go. And I didn't listen. I loved this man. I respected him, but I didn't believe him. And I also didn't care, because what was he giving to my life at the time, right? In terms of like being able to make this dream come true. It wasn't him that was offering it, it was them. So, I didn't listen. So there were red flags. There were red flags. And I didn't listen because the shining outcome at the end of the tunnel seemed to be more enticing than what could happen while I'm trying to get there, right?
Is there anyone who could have said anything to you short of that crew or Jesus Christ himself to
No,
get
I
you
think,
to skip the trip?
honestly, maybe if Jesus had come down and had a conversation with me, I would have considered it. If he was like, well, this is going to happen. But I will say this is like a pretense, but my life wouldn't be where it is now if this hadn't happened.
Right. Right.
So unfortunately, we're going to have to make decisions in our life that are going to lead us into consequences that are going to shift our perspective and shift who we are as people. Some people aren't going to make it through. Some people are. So if this man that I looked up to so much couldn't even get me to not do it, I don't know if even my father could have done it, So yeah, I don't know. That was a tough thing for me, because I should have listened, but I didn't.
Hindsight is 2020, but you were in your 20s, and
I
that
was,
level of maturity, and you're chasing a dream. I think that we all kind of have that sense of invincibility until about the age of 30, when we start to finally see things a little bit differently.
100%.
Um, so that the day finally comes, the 10 days elapse, and
Yeah.
you're off. Walk us through the trip.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll walk you through the trip quickly. Anybody that's been to an all-inclusive resort that drinks alcohol knows how that goes. And at that time, that's where I was at, right? So it, for me, was like a fun party time. We show up. We end up going to the wrong hotel when we showed up, and it was really odd. And then they sent us to the other hotel that we had to be at. And when we got there and we got into our room, when I got there and I got into my room, there was a knock at the door. And I opened the door, and there's a gentleman there, and he comes inside. And I ask him his name, and he says his name is Poppy, which is not a name. And introduces himself, and he's like, yeah, I've worked with so-and-so for a long time, and like, you guys are in good hands. You're absolutely okay. Like, there's nothing to worry about. And he asked me, if there's anything that I needed, and he would see me in a few days. Cool. He leaves. Resort trip is resort trip. There were a couple of like interesting facts about that trip that later on came back that we may or may not get into in this call, but like something really weird was I met this guy on the beach that had horses, and we went horseback riding with him. And later on, when I went into prison, he ended up being in prison as well, and like communicating with us and helping us. It was just like these weird things happened the whole time. So we're there for the entire week. I have the time of my life. I'm just enjoying myself. And then 2 days before the trip ends, I'm sitting in a cabana, and this guy, Poppy, walks by. He goes, follow me. I said, okay, yes, sir. And go into our room, and there's a bag on the floor, and it's open. And this is a normal suitcase. And he goes, I want you to empty the stuff from your suitcase and put it into this suitcase. I was like, okay, that's fine. He was a little sketchy, but I was also a little half cut, and I didn't really notice. And he just said, like, on the day of, you'll leave, you'll be fine. You'll go through the airport, you'll go back to Toronto, you'll meet this person, and you'll move on. So that was it. Fast forward 2 days. It's the night before we're leaving, and my stomach is in knots. And I know that something is wrong, and wake up the next day. So basically, my suitcase is fine. I put all my stuff in it. There's nothing in it. Okay. It's empty. I put all my stuff in it. I close it. I put it upright, and I go to walk out, and It's so back heavy. And I know. I'm like, shit, something is wrong. There's gotta be, this thing has to be full of drugs. So fast forward, end of the day, go to the airport. I've gotten completely, I've had a lot of rum and lemonades throughout the day to just sort of like try and push those feelings down. And I get to the airport and I sit down and I'm panicking and I don't want to go inside because I'm freaking out. And I'm just imagining these drug dogs that are about to maul me and like rip my arms off and like it's done. And I'm like, there's no going back. What do I do? And I remember I kept thinking, call your dad, call your dad, call your dad. I couldn't call him. I was too ashamed. So I go inside and I'm waiting in line and I see the drug dog come up and it walks right by me. I see another drug dog and it goes by and hola, and it goes right by me. Happens, I think it was 5 or 6 times with different drug dogs. Nothing happens. So I get this sort of like newfound confidence. I go up, I put my bag, I go through security, I'm waiting for the plane. I see the plane there. I'm excited. Boom. They call my name over the loudspeaker. So the other person that I'm with goes into the back. They call her back first. She comes back and she's like, they want to look through my bag. And I'm like, damn. So I grab my phone and I start calling the person, the girl. 39 times in a row, I called her over and over and over again. And I'm panicking. I go in the bathroom, I'm shaking. I'm like, I have to stop shaking because around the whole perimeter of this tiny airport are these armed officers in green like a full outfit with big machine guns just standing there. And I'm panicking. So I'm like buying chips, right? So that my hands aren't shaking so much. And I go and I sit down and I'm freaking out. And all of a sudden I see out of the corner of my eye, this huge oversized man, probably had the same size jeans that you once had. And, and these 2 armed officers. And he's like, Alana Moor. And I go, yeah. And he said, ven conmigo. And I don't speak Spanish at this time. And I'm like, shit. So I go into the back and it's chaos. I see this black bag that has a big white circle and an X. That's my bag. I see another bag on the security belt, like that, you know, that goes through the scanner. It's on the scanning belt and it's open. I see an officer over in the corner standing by the bag. And then that big man that was outside is screaming at me in Spanish. And this girl is translating. She said, where did you get your bag? Where did you get your bag? And I start lying. I don't know whose bag. It's not my bag. We got it in Panama City. Like, I don't know whose it is. Da, da, da. And I'm panicking. And they go, come with us. And I sobered up like that, of course. Like, and we go into the back and we sit in this small room. And there's 3 officers that are sitting in the front and they're just sitting there. And I end up sitting there for 5 hours. Obviously, the plane goes. I'm not on it. Nobody's telling me anything. The girl that was sort of translating ended up leaving. So I'm just sitting there for hours panicking. And then this woman walks through the door with this gentleman behind her, who I now know to be the prosecutor. And she sits down and he starts explaining to me like, yeah, this is who we are. And, you know, we need to figure out what's in this bag. And the best thing that you can do right now is cooperate. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a gangbanger. I'm also not a drug lord. I know nothing about the game. The few things that I know about the game don't matter at this time. And so I sign everything that they asked me to sign. Everything.
And was it in Spanish or English?
Spanish.
And you didn't understand it?
No.
In
And
the American legal system, that would give you a loophole. I'm not sure how the Panamanian legal system works.
Great point. So there were so many things that were done wrong, but because I signed those papers that basically said that all the contents of this bag, before they had even gone through the bag, all the contents that are in this bag are mine. Now, go ahead. I know.
Yeah, that's tough. I'm sure like you just felt like an immense pressure to sign it, maybe because you were just like, if I sign it, it'll just be over. And I
That's
don't know
what I thought.
what your hope was. Yeah.
I thought that if I signed it, they would help me. Like, I didn't think anything at this point was going to happen to me. I just figured I would explain my story, tell them it wasn't my bag, and I'd be on my merry way. Right. So I'm like, okay, I'll sign this saying that, I don't know, man, now that I think about it.
It's wishful thinking, man. You're
Yeah.
nervous. You're in your 20s. Again, that air of invincibility
There
is
you
still
go.
there. And I mean, I think a lot of people in your position would probably kind of do the same thing.
No, absolutely. And some people wouldn't. I didn't even, like, I couldn't even really ask for a lawyer. They didn't offer a lawyer. They didn't offer anything.
Hmm.
They did everything wrong. And all the things that they did wrong were enough to drop my case in the end. But because I had signed the paperwork, it was all null and void.
Fudge.
Yes. So,
Oh, brutal. All right.
yeah, it was brutal. I was panicking. I was crying. I was upset. Like, but you're sort of in this mode of, I talk about like when you go through moments of adversity, your body just sort of like coordinates properly and you get everything that you need. So I just sort of knew, like, all right, like, I've done this and let's go. So sorry, let me not jump ahead. I signed the paperwork. I end up like talking to the prosecutor for a little while, and then they go through my bag. So they unzip it. It's on the ground. It's right there. They unzip it. They open it. My clothes are on the left side. On the right side, in a bag that people, if you have a suitcase, there's this like silk lining that you can undo, and that there's a whole other section underneath that's not typically for any of your stuff. It's just where the handle is stored, right? So in there, they open it, and there's this black plastic square. They pull that out. Okay. Then there's insulation, foam insulation. Boom. They figure out how to get it because it's hardened at this time. They pull it out. There's a thick layer of grease, right? Or oil, whatever you want to call it. Engine oil. They sweep that off, and then they start pulling out these vacuum sealed blocks that are covered in stickers. Okay. It's weird. And I'm holding my breath at this point. And I'm like, please be baking soda. Please. Like, and it was not. So as soon as that happened, I was taken into like this back room. I was strip searched, and I was put in handcuffs for my very first time, handcuffs in the front, and I was led out the front of the airport. They took pictures of me. I was led out the front of the airport. 2 armed officers got into this like rickety old truck. They put me in the back, and that was it. The sun was starting to rise. I remember I was scared for my life. I had this vision that like these cops were going to stop and rape me or do something, because you hear about these stories in Central America. So I basically I had figured out how to kind of get my hand out of the handcuffs. I did it for years, but I held on to the lock on the door because I had this feeling like if they tried to lock it, they couldn't, because I was holding on to it. I don't know what I was doing.
Mm. Yeah, I was going to ask if you feared for your personal safety, kind of for those reasons, being in a foreign country, a young, attractive woman. I would imagine, yeah, that kind of dark thought would cross your mind. So,
Yeah,
daggone, that's a whole
absolutely.
lot.
Yeah, it definitely was. So from there, it was sort of like fight or flight. You just have to figure it out. So they took me to they took me to this building where it was so weird. You walked in, there were seats all along the side, and everything's cement, and then there's no windows. There's just these like shapes in the cement, right? So there was that. I was sitting there. They ankle shackled me and wrist shackled me to a chair. Now, I was in winter clothing in the middle of summer because I was going back to winter, and Panama was in the dead of summer. And I was held there for 3 days. One of the days I was put into a hallway on a mat on the floor, handcuffed, ankle shackled, and wrist shackled, where officers just like walked over me all night because they had arrested too many people that were outside. It was sort of like this holding area. And then there was this big square in the cement that was on an angle up in front of me. And that's where all the police officers would sit. So I was basically just on display for 3 days, and it was a men's prison.
Mm.
And the men in the prison had heard that we were there. So they sent us a meal. So we had one meal. I remember one of the police officers did buy us a bottle of Coca-Cola. I've never talked about that. I always forget about that. We had one bottle of water, and that was it. I got one phone call. I remember they brought me my phone to get the number out, and I deleted everything off of my phone in that moment, which benefited me in the end.
Oh man. Okay, they didn't catch you for that?
No, Panama is a very banana republic.
Gotcha.
It's very different. And I remember I called my mom, went to her answering machine, and then we had no shower, no toilet paper. Like I smelt so bad by the end of the 3 days that the officer that had to come undo my ankle shackles, which like completely messed up my legs. You're just having that like rubbing on your ankles. They were like, my ankles were raw, my wrists were raw, but I smelt so bad that the officer was gagging, almost throwing up, because I was just disgusting. Like I had, no toilet paper, no nothing, no shower, no brushing my teeth, nothing, in the dead of summer. So after those 3 days, they put us in the back of a cop car, which is all open. It's like a truck in the back, and you're just like, it's so weird. And think about this. Like, I don't know Panama. I don't know this culture. I don't know Central America. And all of a sudden, I was at a resort. I'm in like the middle of Panama. I'm not in the city. I am in like the suburbs, sorry, not the suburbs, the middle of Panama, where it's like there's not a lot of tourists. It was wild. It was wild. And then they took me to court. I was sentenced to 6 months. In Panama, you're guilty before proven innocent. It was 11 kilos of cocaine. I was sentenced to 6 months without parole. There's no parole. And I was taken to the hospital because they had to do all these tests before I went to prison. Ankle shackled, wrist shackled, like it was humiliating. And then I remember we spent the night, one more night at this male prison. We begged for a shower. So they let us go into a cement room where they put a hose through, and I rinsed off, but I had no clothes because I was there for vacation. So I just put on the same clothes that I had. I remember that was one of the last times for years that I saw the moon, and I just started singing Stand By Me. It was weird. It was such a weird moment.
All right, hold on. Let me back that up. So
Yeah,
you're sentenced to 6 months, but then you said that was the last time you saw the moon for years. So I'm assuming there's a piece of the story that we're not familiar with yet.
Yeah, so I'm getting there. So
Okay.
I'm sentenced to 6 months. I have to go to prison for 6 months, and then I go back to court a year and a half later, and they sentence me to 6 years and 9 months, 81 months. That's what I'm sentenced to in total.
All right, back that up. So 6 months to me seems like a light sentence for, what did you say, 11 kilos of cocaine?
No, it's for investigation. I forgot to say that. Sorry. So
Okay.
6 months investigation, there's no parole. So typically in Canada, you would get 6 months investigation, you'd go home.
Right.
There was no going home.
So 6 months investigate. They're still investigating your case. Like what's going, or that's your punishment for having them investigate in the first place. Like
That's your
what is that?
punishment for having them investigate in the first place. And because I'm a threat to society, I cannot be there and I can't leave the country. So I have to stay in prison.
Okay, so you're sentenced then to the 6 months for the investigation.
Yeah.
And then it's still another year and a half before you wind up. So even after the 6 months are up, you remained in prison.
Yes.
What the hell? I mean, that is about as backwards as I could possibly think, only being familiar with the American legal system here. That just does not compute to me.
Exactly. And I'm not surprised. And many people could not believe that this is how the system worked in Panama, so backwards, but that's just the way that it goes. Now, this is also a side note. You have to remember that like the drug ring in Central America is very prominent. And so the mules are the ones that get the sentencing so that the government can basically use it as like proof of percentage of how many people are in prison for the war against drugs.
Politics. Now that's something I think anybody anywhere can understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I was a number. I was part of the politics of it. And that's just where it started. But there was nothing that I could do. There was
Hmm.
nothing I could do. It was
Hmm.
done like that.
Do you feel like they kind of view you as a trophy, like this pretty foreign girl? Look at like we got her and she was a mule, and let's parade her around and really trumpet her as one of our prisoners.
I would say that in a lot of ways, yes. That's like it's a whole conversation. Like, it's such a corrupt system in Panama. So even, officers hitting on me while I'm sitting waiting to go to court, and they're trying to talk to me while I'm sitting in a holding cell, and asking me if I would date them, if they can come and visit me in prison. Like, it happened all the time, and not just to me. Don't get it twisted. It's not just me. It's just there's no respect. And yes, I felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. I mean, I was the only girl that spoke English other than the person that I was there with. And, a lot of them had never really seen a girl like me. It's a very Caribbean based country. It's like, a lot of people's ethnicity is like Panamanian, Chinese, Jamaican, right? There's a huge mix because of the canal. And so to have this just like European white girl show up was different. Was different.
Did they separate you and your travel companion slash business partner?
No, we were together
No.
the whole time. We did 45 days in basically solitary confinement when we first got there because they couldn't have us with the general population. And then we stuck together. So the way that it works there is you're in rooms with like 20 to 60 other people. They're not individual cells like in the United States.
Whoa. Okay. And just out of curiosity, I mean, what were the meals like once you got to prison? And it wasn't just that one meal, a bottle of Coca-Cola and bottle of water. So what were the meals
Oh,
like down there?
great question. So, food in prison. Blech.
Okay.
So, when I first got there, the rules were very interesting. Okay. Saturdays and Tuesdays, people could come and drop hot, ready food off for you. Right. Sundays, you could have visits and people could bring you hot, ready food. They could also bring you snacks. So things like, we won't get into all of it because it was so strict, but like little bags of cereal, powdered milk, coffee, cookies, crackers, bags of tuna, things like that. Okay. And then when I first got there, the meals were provided by the government. So a truck would show up in the morning. They would give us corn coffee, fake cheese, and a bun. That was my breakfast. And then lunch was typically, we're not talking vegan here. So I hope everyone's ready for that. This is like
Just tell the truth,
chicken
Alana. Tell
necks.
the truth.
For lunch, you're having chicken necks, you're having rice and chicken necks. Then chicken necks are sitting in tomato sauce that is already starting to like podria, like it's starting to go bad.
Hmm.
And what else? Hot dogs that have been boiled for 3 hours. And oh man, just absolutely disgusting. Food that was rotting. And then, yeah, dinner would be the same thing. We called it arroz con buscalo, which is like find it rice. So the rice would come with basically all the extra crap that they had at the end of the day. I got sick. I was sent to the hospital many, many, many times for bacteria poisoning. And
Was that a common thing? I can't imagine.
for
That
me,
would
it
be
was
weird.
because
Okay.
my stomach couldn't handle the bacteria in the food, right?
Jesus. Yeah.
So that's what I was living off of, liver and well, I don't even like to talk about it. It's so gross, but it was what it was. So that's what I ate. Pig's feet, chicken necks, chicken lizard gizzards, like it was all of that with rice.
Nay, a vegetable to be found with you.
I
I
mean,
mean, it sounds
once
like the
in a
closest thing is rice, a whole
no.
grain.
So the thing that I did when I first got there was they sat me down and they asked me, "What do you want? Like, how can we help you while we're here?" And I said, I want to teach fitness. I'm not a fitness teacher, you guys, but I want to teach fitness and I want to be able to have fruits and vegetables. It's really important. Now, you can't have fruit inside of prison because you make alcohol out of it. That's a whole nother story. Yes, I know how it tastes. It was all part of this like project of me going in and being like, this, I'm going to live to tell this story. I need to have all the experiences. So they gave me permission every morning for 4.5 years to come outside at 6 in the morning and work out for an hour by myself, listening to music, and I could eat fruit. And then from 7 to 8, they would let out anyone that wanted to come out. And I'm talking like the most dangerous criminals in Panama come out, and little old me got to teach you fitness. And I didn't speak Spanish at that time. And I just figured it out. And I made fitness plans and go ahead.
How was that received by the, more dangerous inmate population? Were they
Well,
into it or it
yeah.
was received well? Okay.
Oh, yeah. So there's this thing in the Bible. So Panamanians are very Christian, and they also, when they go to prison, we turn to God a lot. And there's this thing in the Bible that just says, like, treat foreigners with the utmost respect. And so a lot of people did. They were absolutely okay with it because they would get what they needed when they needed it, right? Guards would let them bring drugs in, guards would let them bring phones in. Like, I wasn't into that lifestyle. So this is what I wanted to do to take care of my mental. And so that's just the way it was. Of course, people didn't like it too bad, and they would voice their opinions. And I will say this, in the beginning, when I didn't speak Spanish, it was better because I didn't know what was going on. But then when I taught myself the language and I really started to learn, it was like I really knew all the stuff that was happening. That was it. I taught fitness. And this is the last thing that I'll say before 1 second. That you have two choices when you go into prison. You can be constructive or you can be destructive. Now, being destructive is easier because it's supported and it numbs and you don't have to actually face the noise. Being constructive with your time is hard because there's no physical ending, right? There's nothing tangible. So you create these goals for yourself and there's nothing tangible. So I made the choice to be constructive. Now, I didn't always have a good attitude. I didn't always feel good. Like, I got into a few brawls while I was in prison. I had to defend myself. I had a bad attitude. Like, I got into fights with guards that would yell at me. I was pissed off. Don't get me wrong. But I made the decision that I was going to be constructive with my time, and it was a non-negotiable.
Mm.
It was a non-negotiable. So I did. I created a schedule for myself. There was no schedule. It wasn't like in prison in the States where it's like you're up and you're doing this and that and there's education and blah, blah, blah. There was none of that. So I had to do it for myself.
Mm. So I'm really surprised given the other things you've mentioned about your experience thus far that one, they even asked you, how can we make this time here a little bit
Yeah,
better for you? Two, that they gave into the fruit, and three, that they let you lead these fitness courses and even work out on your own before that. I mean, to borrow another biblical phrase, I mean, were those hours in the morning kind of your salvation for the day? Was that your escape?
100%. It was my
Yeah.
escape. And prison is weird in Panama. It's so weird. There's all these rules, but then you get inside and there are these administrative people that care. And it was a small prison. And I created these connections and they would do anything to help. And they did. And they just could. I'm in the middle of nowhere. It was like this open, it was such a weird thing when you think about it, right? But I had a patio in the back and we could be outside all day, but you're surrounded by barbed wire, but you're outside. And we would make, toldas. So we would take sheets and we would make shaded areas and we would sit outside and like it was interesting. And then it was interesting. And then the wars happened, right? That's a whole nother thing.
Okay. Yeah. Before we get to the war, I mean, my God, what else can we pile onto this story? It seems to me, though, based off of what you're describing, they really do try to buy into that idea of rehabilitation while a person is in there, trying to make them a better person, should they choose to go that route. Obviously, that person, that prisoner has to make that choice for themselves, just as you did. You can't force somebody to go down that road, but we're going to give you every opportunity. Doesn't sound like a lot of times that happens here in the US prison system. Again, you have to make that choice, and even then it can be very difficult, but my hat is off to you for, choosing to continue to improve yourself while you were in there. A lot of people could have just said, "Forget this," and gone down that much darker road. You rose above, so my hat's off to you for that.
Yeah, amen. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that was not easy though.
Yeah.
And there were times that I really felt like giving up. Like, how do you get up every day not knowing when you're going home? Because there's no set date, and fighting to try to go home sooner. And you're constantly up against these promises of like, yeah, you're going to go home and you're going to go home. And here's this new thing and that new thing. And, and yes, you're right. They do. There's tons of programs. There were a lot of things and activities. I always talk about this. My mom and my sister laugh at me all the time. The amount of things and skills that I learned while I was in prison, it's amazing. I can fix your toilet and give you a haircut and can vegetables and fruits for you and then show you. Like, I learned so much because I wanted to. So you're right, they do. But most of the people are not in there for that.
Hmm.
They're in there because this is the life that they've chosen. And they want to continue to numb, and they like that.
Can learning that trade actually help them obtain a career once they're released, or is that
Yes.
just an idea of passing time? Because the idea would be to graduate from prison into a job so you can then become a
Ah,
productive member of society.
yeah, Chuck, that's the goal, right? But,
Obviously, in a perfect world, absolutely, that is the goal.
and when I say to you, the one reason why I've taken so long to talk about my story is that reason, right? There's a lot of judgment that comes along with like, oh, she's a convict. She is an ex-convict of 4.5 years for international drug trafficking. So it's the same thing. Where the government lacks in Panama are the systems in place to help women secure a job when they get out of prison.
Mm.
That's the thing that's lacking. And so, yes, maybe they have all of the resources that they can have in prison, but they're doing better now. And I'm still very involved in prison advocacy and in Panama. And, I have my little group that I have there that helps the women in prison that I was in prison with still. But it's not that easy to just get out and get a job. Right. And so a lot of the women go back to what they were doing.
The stigma carries
Of
forward.
course.
Yeah. Luckily, I mean, spoiler, you've landed on your feet, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. So you mentioned though that you really didn't know what the end date would be, and maybe there were some carrots that were dangled in front of you, like, oh, well, maybe you'll get out here because there's this new thing that came up. I'm assuming you meant like something with your case, or little rays of hope that a lot of them, I'm sure, wound up getting snuffed out. But why did you say that there really wasn't an end date? I mean, if you had been sentenced to 6.5 years, didn't they say, well, you're eligible to be released on such and such a date?
No, it doesn't work like that. Many people in prison get out well after their end date. I know many of them. And so they do this presidential pardon. Okay. They started it the year that I got there and they ended it the year before I was supposed to leave. So the presidential pardon was twice a year. They would go through the list of people that had good behavior and that had finished their 2/3. 2/3 was the magic word while I was away. Okay. So they would go through the list. They would pick people. The list would come out in the newspaper. Okay. We would get the newspaper. We would see the list. People would be on the list. And within 24 hours to 2 weeks, they would walk free. It was crazy. So they would still have tons of time left in their sentence, but if they were working or whatever it was just this presidential pardon. You'd be like, yep, so, and so. They'd be on the list. I remember at Christmas one time, the list came out. This girl left because you would get these 24 and 12-hour passes after a certain amount of time. She came back wasted. They were like, you're getting another 6 months. And the next day she was released on this presidential pardon. So when you say that, I was banking on this presidential pardon for years. And the last year and a half, I fought so hard to get out. I lost 15 pounds. I was so sad. I didn't let my family come and visit me anymore. Not that I didn't let them. Sorry. We all agreed. Like, I was getting out, so we weren't doing it. And I never got out. The list came out, I think 4 different times, and I was never on the list. And then
How were you finally granted your emancipation, as it were?
I worked my butt off. I got 2/3 done. And I started a fitness program in the prison, and I got like the first fitness workout equipment for the prison. And like, I was doing stuff, right? I was just doing things. It's so weird. So the judge would come and visit the prison. Like, we would have activity days, we would do these like lip syncing competitions, and I sang J-Lo one year and I won. And we would have these speaking competitions that, that's where I started speaking before I did Speaker Slam 2 weeks ago. And then, he would come and visit us, and he really thought that I was doing great things and he wanted to help me. As soon as I had my 2/3 done, I had a meeting with him. And we finally got me a court date. And it wasn't that easy. Like, I had a lawyer that was helping me, and they weren't giving it to me and weren't giving it to me and weren't giving it to me. And I was waiting. And then in order for me to get out of prison, I had to have somebody that took responsibility for me. And so my parents had met this guy that had done prison time in the United States and now lived in Panama. He heard about my story and got involved and helped me the entire way through. So he was this advocate for trying to find somebody to take responsibility for me. So he found someone. I got my court date. And yeah, that's sort of how it went. Found someone. This woman was like the woman that built the brand Burt's Bees into what it is today. She lives in El Valle, and she helped me. And it wasn't just her. Like, my parents poured their blood, sweat, and tears into helping me. I watched my father probably lose 20 pounds coming to see me every 6 months, doing everything that he could. This man did everything that he could to try to get me out. And he lived it with me. And, it almost broke him. And so that was it. I got my court date. I showed up to court on the 27th, and the translator didn't show up. I was packed and ready to go. And I said, respectfully, Judge, can I just do it myself? I speak the language fluently now. I taught myself in prison. I taught myself a lot in prison. I had a lot of time on my hands, okay? And I wanted to use it wisely, and they wouldn't let me. So I went back to prison and had to spend another night there. And I remember I got back to my cell, and at that time, the prison was growing. There were a ton of people in my cell, and I had been transferred to the bad girl cell, not because I was a bad girl, but because I was no longer working. So they moved me away from that cell. And it was like all these gangbangers from Panama City that had been transferred, and they were just like, we're partying tonight. Like, this is wild. And it was just this wild, crazy night. I did not. I went to bed. I was crying, but they were just like, tomorrow's the day. Like, we got it. And yeah, that was it. The next day I did it. But, to talk a little bit about prison before we move on from it, like, people rally for you in prison. It's a lot. Like, people rallied for me. If I was sick and I needed help, the girls would like have riots. If they wanted to all of a sudden be able to start cooking, which they did after a year and a half, they riot. They throw things out. They light things on fire. Like they would come together and figure out a way to make it happen. Yes, there were gang violence, fights, like tons of scary moments, but there were moments where like we would come together and support each other. It was, yeah, it's crazy.
Lovely thought, but does step one really have to be rioting?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't get anything in prison by just talking about it. Actually, like that's the culture. The culture is you want it, show us you want it. I have videos of girls up on the roof in prison that had like climbed up on the roof and they wanted one of the girls gone, transferred because she had like beat someone almost to her death in the morning. And I watched it. I was the only person that saw it actually. That was a really tough moment. But anyways,
Okay,
um
you witnessed a murder in prison?
not a murder, almost murder.
Okay.
She almost beat her to death. Many times I saw that stuff.
Wow.
I saw a lot. And you just it's part of it, right? It's you have to just make a decision to get through it and be tough. You just do.
How did you like then still stay on your path, the path that you had chosen when you're witnessing all of these horrific type of acts?
A choice.
Right
Like,
on.
come on. You just like how do you lose a bunch of weight when you're addicted to food?
I mean, I got you, I hear you, but a lesser person, Alana, would have folded there like a piece of paper or
Yeah.
even just crumpled, but
I
you still chose to rise above.
yeah,
That
it's
takes a certain kind of strength that not everyone has.
listen, I appreciate that. That is a high compliment for me. I think my parents taught me to be resilient. My mom always taught me to be independent. My dad teaches me to like not take anybody's dignity from them. And I'm tough. I was built for this. And I made a choice every single day through my focus. And I had people that were supporting me, and fitness and writing and journaling and business plans and reading and learning the Spanish language. It was like I had things to do. I had things to do. You guys want to gossip and be mad and fight and da-da. And I was involved in a lot of the drama. That's how it happens. But it's like at the end of the day, one day I'm going home. So do I want to go home and be bitter and be depressed and give up? Because I still have to live the rest of my life. And I don't want to commit suicide. It was not an option for me. So it was like really, really tough to push through. But I coached myself and becoming a life coach after I got out of prison. It's like my mom always says this: you took radical responsibility for your life, which is hard. And you are a living example of what actual coaching looks like. I coached myself. I coached myself. I,
Super strong inside. I'm gonna call you. You're so strong. I'm gonna call you Teflana. That's what I'm gonna call you. Like that is
oh
just
my God,
amazing.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, own that one, Teflana. Like you
Yeah.
earned that. Holy
Thank
smokes!
you so much. That's really
Yeah.
sweet. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Um. Okay. So the day finally comes. You get out. Where are your hopes and dreams at this point? You had the dream of being this famous fashion designer. Was that still on your radar, or what were you thinking your life's purpose was at that point?
No, it was not. That was no longer on my radar. I do love fashion and I love designing and I love all of that. But I there were a lot of moments in prison where I surprised myself with my capabilities and what I was able to do. And I did this speaking competition. At one point, I remember I saw it posted on the wall and I went to administration. I said, "Hey, can I do this? I've always loved public speaking." And they said, "Yeah, you could do it." I mean, nobody believed that I could because at that point, it was like 2 years in. I didn't really speak the language well. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do this. So I was always trying to find my purpose while I was in prison. But I knew that I wanted to do something like in the fitness realm, in the not influencer realm, but I wanted to tell my story. So I wrote this speech. I translated it into Spanish. I had some girls help me and I did it. It was a competition. I won. And then I ended up in Panama City in this beautiful theater, like performing with no handcuffs in front of like hundreds of people. It was broadcasted on television. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. It was cool. I didn't win when I went to Panama City because there were 2 competitions, but I still had the experience. And I knew that that's why I had gone into prison, because I had the tools before I even went in to be able to get through this experience and be stronger and learn so much from it. So when I got out, my goal was a little bit of financial stability, find a job. But if I'm quite honest with you, I knew that I wanted to tell this story in some capacity. Being on stages, like when people ask me, what's your biggest goal? I'm like, I want to be on a stage in front of thousands of people telling my story, but not just telling the story, telling the steps that I took to become stronger, to take responsibility for my life, and what I did to get there, right? How I created discipline in my life, what I did every day, what I think is important, right? How you can stop making excuses for why you feel so shitty, your life is so hard, and take responsibility and own it and realize how you start to trust yourself, and success happens, right? So my goal was to take myself from zero, literal zero. And I worked for Sunny Justice, who was the woman from Burt's Bees. And I wanted to become efficient in running a business, entrepreneurship, learning how to take care of myself, learning how to help others, and giving back to the community. I knew I wanted to start a foundation that worked in the prison system. I wanted to be an advocate for women in prison and what I think was missing, what I think is missing in the system to better a woman's chances of not coming back into prison. Return rates in prison are like 89%. That's crazy. So the other thing I knew, Chuck, was that it wasn't going to be an overnight success.
Right.
That's what I had wanted when I ended up in prison.
Yeah.
It was very clear that this was not going to happen overnight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many parallels between what it was you were just describing there about stripping yourself of that victim mentality and having to lean on yourself to like pull yourself up, make the changes, accountability, personal
Yeah.
accountability. And whether you're talking about changing the entire trajectory of your life or improving your health, those same principles hold true. And so I'm sure like the nutrition hardcore exam roomies who are like, man, I have never heard an exam room quite like this before. They're probably thinking the same thing though, right? Because these stories of transformation that we have heard with people who have pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, who are knocking on death's door because they were in such poor health, they echoed the same thing, Alana, that you were just talking about, even though circumstances were completely different. There's a universality about that, if that's a word.
Yeah. It is now.
It's unbelievable. And again, that goes back to that inner strength that not everybody has. And you are a rare bird in that instinct. And I'm just going to keep telling you that because I am in awe of everything that you've been sharing with us here today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I want to just say something about what you just said. I am a huge believer that your mindset is directly connected to your health. And, the biggest thing I used to say to girls in prison, because they were addicted to Coca-Cola, I was like, how much you're sick, over and over and over again. I would always say this: water. You need water. Your body needs water. Like, people have been cured of life-threatening diseases just by having water in their life. So taking care of your body, mind, and soul is so important for your health to be in a good position. And I watched so many women who, in terms of their nutrition, didn't take care of their body, in terms of like drugs and alcohol, what you're consuming, didn't take care of their body, and then also their mindset, right? When you're living in drama, when you're living in constant depression, when you're making that choice, right? And people probably roll their eyes at me all the time, but I'm like, it really is a choice. You have to decide that you are worth it. Even if you don't believe it, just find a way to figure out that what it is that you need to do to begin to believe that. You can have the life that you want. Who cares what your parents told you? You can go and change your diet and lose weight or gain weight. Whatever you want to do, your mindset is directly connected to your health, period. And I know that because I've watched it happen in my life, right? It's so important. And water.
And water.
Yeah, water.
And
Water
water.
and mindset, baby. And a few apples and oranges.
So, how did your diet begin to shift? Let's touch on that because you and I met through the Planted Expo, which is one of the largest plant-based events in Canada. Matter of fact, it might be the biggest of all. Great job this year in Vancouver, Toronto, Seattle. How did you wind up eating plant-based?
Okay, so my story with plant-based is different. So, yes, not plant-based in prison and was never, I had no connection with being plant-based at all. Now, I started when I was pregnant with my son to really be more conscious about the food that I was putting into my body. And my mother, who is huge on sustainability, like she's in the ESG world and, she's big on sustainability, started having these conversations with me. And I started, without even realizing it, eating a way more plant-based diet because I just like it. Like I was having a smoothie in the morning and then I was having tofu salad for lunch but I was still incorporating cheese. Now, I still incorporate cheese once in a while into my diet. I will never lie to anyone about that, but plant-based for me was the huge shift happened for me when I started working for Planted Expo. I had already had this love and passion from watching the Game Changers. And it was interesting. It was this whole thing. I just had gotten home from being in Panama when I got my job with Planted Expo. And I had watched the Game Changers, started shifting my diet, and then I had a conversation with them and they were like, it's really big for us. It's huge. Like plant-based is like, it's the most important piece of what we do. And I was like, okay, I'm going to let you guys know I am plant-based, but cheese has been the hardest thing for me to break. It's not an all the time thing. It's like, but I have to say, Seattle Planted this year, it changed the game for me, changed the game. And also Toronto, like the brands that are coming out with these plant-based cheeses. Sorry. Anyways, I know this is off topic,
No,
but
I got you. There's a huge like front page article in the Washington Post. Matter of fact, today as we tape this about vegan cheeses just like going through
taking
epic new
off.
heights. I mean, it is
Yes.
unbelievable.
Yes. So that was the thing for me. Now, I know how I feel. Like, here's the other thing too that I will say. I am big on whole foods. I live in, a tropical country right now, and I've always been huge on living from the earth. I am not huge on processed foods. Now, in the vegan world too, there is a ton of processed foods. And that's the reality. And so processed foods obviously feed into illness as well. I don't care what anybody says, but I am big on whole foods. So I really enjoy preparing my food from fresh, organic fruits and vegetables that come from the land. Like that is my biggest thing, right? And I eat a lot of cassava and plantain and purple yam. And I've found beautiful mushrooms, obviously, beautiful ways to incorporate that into my diet and into my son's diet as well. And I love it. But yeah, I'm a whole foods girl. Like I want fruit right from the tree. I want vegetables right from the plants, and that I can live off. But there better be some rice in there too. Better be
I
some
could,
carbs.
yeah, the rice came with you out of prison, did it?
Yeah, it did.
It's
Yeah,
all
it
good.
did.
It's all good. There's no nothing wrong with that.
No,
That sounds amazing though. Like really, I might have to take a venture down there to whatever tropical climate you're living
please do.
in, and yeah, we'll get our grub on for sure. You can
Yeah.
introduce me to the ways of super fresh food,
Oh, yeah.
because I know Whole Foods, but it's a grocery store.
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to get it like straight from the land. That's epic.
Yeah, it's the best thing ever.
So let's kind of wrap things up
Yeah.
here. Where do things stand right now with your foundation? You say that it's still going, you're still in contact. So I'm sure there's some people who are hearing this right now that want to learn more. Is there somewhere they can go? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say this off the bat. Whenever you start, you have to suck. So I have a website right now, but it's
Facts.
Canva website. I am starting from scratch. So I started this foundation when I was still in Panama. And basically, what we do is we accept donations and we create dignity packages for women in prison. That is just the beginning. That is the beginning. The end goal for me is to have a foundation that directly works with the prison system to help women that are coming out of prison find work. My big, big dream is to have a place for them to work one day. But that is the most important thing for me, allowing these women to have income coming in when they leave prison and allowing them to keep their dignity, right? The government of Panama does not provide anything when you get into prison. Nothing. Not a bar of soap, not a roll of toilet paper. So when I was in prison, we used to rally when new girls would come and we'd create packages for them. When I got out of prison, this is how I rally. So alanamoor.my.canva.site. That's my website. You can go on and you can donate. You can also DM me at Alana Moor Speaks on my Instagram, and I'm happy to give you the link to donate if that's something you're interested in. Or I'm so open and interested in talking with people that might be connected with other people to really help me to grow this. I think there's a lot of lack when it comes to supporting women that are in prison, and 98% of them are there for drugs, which means that they are there for a decision that they made for somebody else.
Mm.
So,
Do you feel like, and I've asked this of other people who have, improved their health and now work with others. Do you feel like in a lot of ways you're actually also going kind of back in time and trying to help the old you out as well? Like, yeah,
what
yeah.
I needed. I always think it's like it's really easy to talk to people that have been through what you're going through to understand what you need, right?
Hmm.
When you're
Hmm.
a new mother, you're not going to talk to somebody that's never had a child. You're going to talk to somebody that has been a mother and they know what they need to tell you, what you need to prepare for, and they know what you need. So I know what these women need better than most people that are advocating for women in prison. If you haven't been in prison, you can't 100% know what they need. This is why I advocate. I am
Yeah,
an advocate because I believe that I went through this situation to be able to come out and be the voice for these women that are not being heard, and they deserve to be.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. There has to be a reason that you went through
Yeah.
everything. There has to be.
Yeah.
Jeez
So
Louise, like I said, you're such a rare bird. I love it.
yeah, thank you. So
And
go ahead.
yeah, I mean, was there any contact ever with the
Mm,
promoter who you looked up to so much and kind of got you down this rocky road?
no, absolutely not. I've never spoken to her, him, them ever again. And that was a big reason why I didn't want to share my story right away because I was sort of nervous about that. And I'm not anymore. This is my
Gotcha.
story. I was put on this earth to do that. That's why, I'm starting to build my career as a keynote speaker,
Yeah.
right? That's the goal. That's the dream. That's why I'm coaching people. It's like, no, there's never been any contact.
I feel like their identity is almost irrelevant to the story because now this is
Yeah.
so uniquely you and everything that you're building, and yeah, it's almost irrelevant. And yeah, the journalist in me is like, oh, I wonder who that is. But there's
I'll
another
tell you
part of me,
after.
it doesn't matter. Like it just absolutely hands down does not matter.
Yeah.
And for you to do what you've done, Alana, is remarkable. And you just said, like, 2 weeks ago, you did something pretty big. You got up on stage, and it was like very recently you began sharing your story. So, I mean, how cathartic has this been for you?
It's been such a learning moment for me to actually face the story again and really go through. And Speaker Slam was all about finding one story in that 4.5 years, and speaking about freedom. That was the topic. So it's been, I'm really excited. I'm still processing. There's been a lot of excitement around it. People have reached out, and the video is, this is so corny, but it's kind of gone viral. Like there's been a lot of views on it, which like I've only ever had 13 views on my Instagram. So it's, for me, it's like it matters. People want to hear this. They need to hear this. And it's not about me. It's about what I went through. I want and hope and dream to impact. I always say one person, and someone's like, you can't just say one person, but it's true because one person will impact somebody else, right? It's it was amazing. I got up on stage, I froze, but I realized that it is what I love, and it is where I thrive, and it is where my purpose lies. And I was begging to find that for so long. And this is what I was made to do. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And I'm ready. I'm like, put me in, coach. Put me in. I'm ready to go. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
And as somebody who's been in front of the camera or behind a microphone for more than 2 decades now, I will tell you that you have it. From a professional standpoint, you have it. You have the look, you have the delivery, you have the charisma, you have the articulation. You're able to tell the story so eloquently, but the intangible is your experience and the authenticity. And that is what is going to set you above and put you right at the top. And you will rise to become the cream of the crop. And I have no doubt that you are going to become super successful and change a lot of lives because of your experience. You did not go through this for nothing. You are about to change a lot of lives.
Thank you. That
Yeah.
was really nice. That was too nice.
It's
That
too
was so
true.
sweet. Thank you.
I'm not
I
blowing
really,
smoke here, my friend. I'm just telling you,
yeah.
where
Yeah.
it's at. And I'm so proud of you for how far you've come, because the first time we met, I mean, it was what, a couple of years ago, and you told me just a little bit about your story, and I was like, "Oh man, you got to come on." You're like, "I'm not ready. I'm not
Yeah.
ready. I'm not ready." And
Ready.
now you're ready, and here you are. And for the last hour and 16 minutes, I've been absolutely enthralled and wrapped up in this incredible tale of yours, and I'm so proud of you for everything that you were able to overcome and everything that you did in prison, for God's sakes. Like, let's not forget that too.
Yeah, let's not.
I mean, you are just
Hard.
you're something else.
Yeah, thank you. No, I did. I worked hard. I'll give myself that. I really it was not, my dad always said, do something every day. Like be something, learn something new every day. So I did. And I laughed every day. That's the other thing too, I will say, last thing. Like I had good days in prison. It's all a choice. You
Mm.
can have good days. And I want to say to you, Chuck, thank you. Thank you for, because I see the people that come on the show. They have an opinion, they have a voice, they have a following. And for you to allow this opportunity for me to use your platform to tell my story, I am grateful to you because you have no obligation to do that. And I just want to say, like, I really appreciate you, honestly. Yeah, and I appreciate that I was able to feel like I could trust you with my story in a time where people that were around me in my workplace didn't even know, and I was still sort of apprehensive about opening up that side of me, because I knew that when I did, it was gonna. I better be ready. So I'm ready.
And I
Let's do
mean, girl, you need to make the rounds on the speaker circuit.
this.
And so
Please tell your
I
people.
mean, I will definitely be telling my people about you,
Yeah,
and let's do some more shows together, live and in person,
absolutely.
and whatever I can do to help you out, because it's all about it's helping you, but it's going to help a lot of other people too, and that's my purpose, is to help
Mhm.
people just as it is yours,
Yeah,
and just incredible experience. So thank you, my friend. I'm
thank you.
just super proud of you.
I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. I'm so grateful for you, and thank you for this opportunity. Woo!